Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. And welcome to episode number 300. I have Minh and Ian with me to celebrate this amazing milestone. My goodness.
Ian's our host who's going to interview me and Debbie because Deb and I have been working on this show for the last 3 years. 3 years and 2 months, or 3 years and 3 months actually, yeah.
Yeah. So look, I don't think we ever thought we'd get to this point. We're very excited that we have continued to grow and bring in more listeners and more speakers and more content. So yeah, just want to acknowledge the listeners, all the guest speakers that we've had along the way, our interviewees, members of our team, of our organisation who have spoken on the podcast, contributed to it, and everyone who's been instrumental of getting the SDA Housing Podcast to the point where it is.
And it's a major milestone. 300 episodes. I mean, most people would never imagine they're going to get to that 300 point. And to actually achieve it, that's remarkable. It's consistency, persistency, and that's something that's missing for most people.
Yeah.
Well done.
Minh, any thoughts as we open this episode?
I just want to yawn. 300 over, 1,000 to go. Ian, I'll let Ian ask us the questions. It's really Ian throwing questions at us, asking how we feel, what we've done, what we've achieved on the podcast, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, let's think about the highlights from the journey so far. So, look, I think maybe thinking about all of the podcasts you've ever done, do you have any particular episodes that you have in mind that you thought were absolutely, memorable or most important to mention?
Look, from my mind, I think there was a bunch of episodes or even sub-series that we sort of covered on. But some of the episodes that certainly were highlights in terms of the most downloaded or impactful, I want to touch on the episodes that we had with Bruce Bromley and his team from SDA Consulting. So that was episodes 160 and 170, and they date back to August and September 2023. But they were really highlighting different aspects of the design guidelines as well as property management within the SDA world. Of course, we had the SDA price review, and that was June 2023, when things changed so significantly. We actually recorded 4 episodes. Do you remember that, Minh?
It was in 1 week too.
Yeah. So that was episodes 139, 40, 141 and 142.
So why did you do so many episodes in such a short space of time? What were you trying to get across?
We were trying to unpack the content of these massive changes to the income, IL being so much a focus, and the
reductions in high physical support for funding for apartments.
Yeah.
Did you find that there was a lot of contradiction as to why this had been revamped in such a way? And were you trying to break that down so that you could understand or help everybody else understand what the focus was? Is that the reason why you did so many episodes?
Well, we tried to unpack it the way we saw it, and we knew that it was a changing SDA price kind of analysis, and we wanted to get the feedback from the market. People contacting us to say what their thoughts were, because it's just really opening the channel up to talk to others, really, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the documentation behind the reasoning for all the changes in the prices was vast, and we were kind of going through it bit by bit, piecemeal by piecemeal, to break down what had changed and why it had changed the way it had. So yeah, there was just a lot to talk about at that point.
And how did it then affect what your what you did as a team, as a business? What was the immediate impact of this?
On this very topic, at that moment in time,
Yeah, literally.
I think we thought it was a massive change. It was a wonderful change. However, did we really implement it? No, we didn't. But then we saw everyone else change to IL builds out there, 2-bed, 2-tenant IL builds, and yet we didn't really push it that hard because we thought, hang on, doesn't seem right. And then we saw the entire marketplace out there started building IL apartments, IL houses, also in Perth. In Melbourne, but it's just happening everywhere. And that was a change that
was a big change. But I think the other change was the fact that it gave the confidence to the investor market in terms of the hugely greater potential returns.
Yes.
Yeah, so it went from, say, 35 to 40 per person up to, in some cases, 70 to 80 per person.
Yeah.
And that suddenly changed the landscape. So you had to break it down for people. Was it real? Did people believe it?
No, a lot of them didn't know.
But the reality was that NDIS wasn't really funding those numbers anyway.
Yes,
So
correct.
it was all for nothing.
But that's sort of what we've learned subsequently. It's taken us the last nearly 2 years to really understand the true landscape in terms of that. But anyway, it was a very exciting time. Other episodes, I think, that stood out, one of the biggest downloaded episodes was our SDA 101, episode 19.
Yeah, Matt did it.
Yeah, back in the early days. Still one of our most downloaded episodes, for good reason, because it's, breaks down the basics for those who are new and learning. Of course, there was the NDIS review in late 2023. We published the NDIS 2.0 in January 24, episode 202. And that, what was all that one about?
I actually can't remember.
Wasn't there something about where they were thinking about discontinuing the IA?
Yes, exactly. That was part of the bigger NDIS review that was covering the entire NDIS, but of course there were certain aspects specifically relative to home and living and SDA, and that was definitely something that threw a lot of fear into the SDA world. Like, what on earth are they doing? Recommending phasing out IL when a few months ago they've given IL funding a massive bump up. So that was interesting. A couple more that were interesting in these. This was also in that time period, September 23. The NDIS released their SDA demand projections. Episode 165, we discussed that. And that was quite a moment in the SDA history because we hadn't had anything from the NDIS at all previously to that in terms of predictions, apart from them saying that they expected 6% of all participants would eventually qualify for SDA. But this broke it down to give us a bit more clarity on what that might look like.
And so that did give you a landscape of what the demand was likely to be, where it was, and what category was the most in demand. Is that what you were able to break down?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when I look back now, I think that actually had a very detrimental effect in certain ways because they were talking about where the demand was going to be growing the most, the top 10, and the areas, I think 5 of the top 10 were in Melbourne. And post that date, we saw a massive jump in pipeline numbers in Melbourne West and Melbourne Southeast, which were 2 of the highest predicted growth areas. So whilst it was great to get that, unfortunately, everyone took that as gospel and jumped in. And we now, obviously, everyone knows we're faced with such an oversupply in those parts of Melbourne.
But then obviously the information has reached so many people from that source. So you're not necessarily the locus of influence on that.
Oh, no, we're not. But just the fact that those demand projections did, I think, partially create a bit more of a move towards construction in those areas. But yeah, our episode was just a breakdown of what it was. And again, it was one of the most downloaded episodes that we've had in our history. And the other one I wanted to point out was one of Minh's favourite episodes that he'd been itching and wanting to do for a long, long time. And he managed to get Brad Fuller to the table, and they recorded the SDA Wall of Shame in April 2024.
And guess what? The SDA Wall of Shame 2.0 is coming out in the next few weeks because Brad and I spoke about this 2 days ago, and we're keen to talk about all the negative press in the news about
so much
Cocoon, NDISP, fraudulent activity by SIL providers in the last month or so. They've been published online. You're right, Ian, there's so much. And it's a shame. It's a shame it's all happened all at the same time.
Yeah.
It is a shame, and it's to the detriment of everybody else in the industry. And basically they're trying to slice the cake bigger for themselves and leave less for everybody else. And when you try to do it right, you suffer. But that's what we've got to do. We've got to keep on going, haven't we?
Yeah. Anyway, so I think that was all of the episodes I'd sort of gone through and highlighted.
Well, I mean,
about
in those
history. Were there any other ones that you could?
No, look, I think the important topic today really is what have we gotten out of this journey?
Yeah. So look, in terms of you've got your favorite episodes and your favorite speakers, what would you say that as individuals, as an organization, that you've got from having produced this many podcasts?
Business relationships.
100%.
With other business providers?
Just other people.
Other stakeholders.
The whole,
And I'll give examples here. Tanya Gomez, she was a Tanya Gomez Consulting. She was a listener. She came on our show as an auditor. We've been brought onto her show as well. We're now being brought to her events now, the speaker circuit. And it's wonderful for her to look at us as experts in SDA with other people in the industry to rely upon to present as well at her events. So Tanya Gomez there. Dr. Ian Singh from Sedana Constructions as a builder in Perth. He went above and beyond to listen to what our thoughts were in designs that met the needs of participants in the marketplace. And we worked very closely with him there. Bruce Bromley, he always pops up his head every month or 2 months and say, hey, this is wrong in your podcast. And yep, cool. Love your work, Bruce. And we always take it on board. So we get feedback from people. Kira Nicholson in Perth as a designer, Sean Kirkland. Like there are people out there who follow our show. Also Catalina from Hand in Hand Support Coordination. They reach out to us after a year or two and they say they love our show. They love listening. They love learning from what we talk about, and they love how we bring on board other guest speakers. So we're creating long-term relationships with business people out there around Australia who value our content that we present to the marketplace, and that's. It means a lot to hear that. It really does mean a lot because, we don't, no one funds our show. It's all our own time and we all work together. Since the beginning when Erin was the podcast manager and Matt was a contributor, we've all put our heads together to just put content together to share it to the world here because, I was talking to Debbie the other day in another episode previous to this, and I said to Debbie during the data pipeline information, no one out there actually says, no, don't invest there. Think about this. Yeah.
Very few. Most of the time, it's always the positive. Yeah, you've got to do this.
The builders want to build, from design.
Yeah.
But they all want their piece of the action. So no one ever says, no, don't do it.
Mm-hmm. But for very good reason is that you are trying to fill that space and you're saying, hey, look, there is a beacon of light here. We'll tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but also what you should do.
Yeah.
And did you find that having given that information, put that input in, that you learned as much from it as you taught?
Yes. Debbie and I had a conversation about 2 weeks ago, Ian. People were coming back to us for our SDA Housing Assist service for tenancy support. We were looking at our database for the inquiries coming in who have empty houses.
Yep.
And Debbie says, they spoke to us 3 years ago or 2 years ago. We told them not to go there and they still went there. And now, I told you so.
Yep.
Like we can see the activity here from the history of our communication. And what was sad to see, Ian, was when people they ring us up, talk to us about returns and the opportunity, and we say, don't think you'll get that. Oh no, they'll move on to another agent to hear what they want to hear.
Hear what they want to hear.
And then go get down the path.
Yep. And
full circle, they come back to us a year or 2 years later going, oh yeah, you were right.
I've got exactly that scenario now. I've got a client, I've been explaining to them where the trends are going, what they need to be looking at, what the realistic return is, and yet what they're doing is they're applying the logic of typical residential property plus the overlay of highly hyped incomes coming from non-SDA real estate agents. And it's very interesting to watch it. No matter what you do, even if your voice is a voice of reason, they're not accepting it. So it's a mutual process of learning. And you've had that correction. You've had people giving you back the feedback that's allowed you to then say, hey, you know what? We were humble enough to actually accept that, and we're gonna share it with our audience.
Yes.
I just want to also touch on a couple more people who have been regular guest speakers with us over the history of the podcast, or have just connected with us in some way, shape, or form. Of course, where Brad Fuller, we know, has been on quite a few episodes. The guys from Everhomes, Adapt Housing, also some of the other providers in Melbourne. We got the guys from Paramount. There was, of course, Sunil, Kumar, Hiram, who all connected. They were listeners, and they've since gone on to become, well connected with what we're doing in the industry.
And they give us feedback about what they're doing as well, which is
absolutely, yeah.
So very important, Ian, is the impact of the listeners becoming collaborators with us on our podcast and our content and our research, because we're all about transparency. We all believe in giving the humble truth out there to the marketplace, and we don't see anyone else giving that honesty out there.
Can I just make a comment about that? I worked for another couple of companies previously, and I used to listen to your podcasts, and I would then take that information along with stuff that I'd been reading, and I would then start to disseminate that to my client base, even if it was contradictory to what I was being told, because it was so important to start to establish where the truth was. And it was somewhere out there, but nobody was being that source of light. So I owe quite a bit to you for those podcasts as well.
Well, thank you, Ian. And that brings me to, I wanted to actually ask you some questions about, obviously you weren't necessarily a listener of the podcast when we began 3 years ago.
No, I wasn't. I discovered it probably some way part through 2023.
Yeah, about halfway through. So, well, since you started listening, or as you know, we started the podcast in the early February, I think, 2022. But what's changed in the SDA landscape in that period of time from your perspective?
Look, there's been a lot of changes in the last year since I've actually joined you, and I've been able to observe what has changed. The type of property that has come to the fore has definitely changed. There was much more of a trend towards people living on their own or demanding that that's the option. And there was much more need for those inner ring, more centrally located properties. And so I've seen more apartments sell than ever before. And I think that was the biggest change in the last year. But over the last 3 years, as you have pointed out, as we get new information, there were different rushes into different categories. But over the last 3 to 5 years, the information has just evolved. And then there's been cycles that have been impacted by areas, oversupply, undersupply, and lending. And don't forget, the lenders have one of the biggest influences on this, because where they say they will lend is where they will build the next property. If they say no and they blacklist the postcodes like we've seen since December, we know that those areas will no longer get a development going on in the SDA space. So that has really changed in the last 3 to 5 years. And I think that's had the biggest impact over time. So type of property, category, information that's available, and then the lending arena.
I was reading something the other day that was saying that the SDA market is 2-3 years off from maturity. Do you think that is a valid thought, or what are your predictions?
Well, I think the nature of the investment will change. I think there's going to be a greater move towards the fractional side of investing. And the reason I say that is because there will be less people willing to put more money into the properties because of the uncertainty of where they're going to get their demand from, or whether the funding is going to come through. However, that model can be broken down into either working with institutional investors, whether you're doing it through funds, and I really don't like that avenue, but I've seen that come to the fore, or whether there's now international funding coming in, and there's definitely rumors of international funders coming in to support the lending in this space. So that will change the landscape, because we've gone from a pretty much a monopoly of one lender under a couple of names, and that is changing. There's more lenders appearing. They're changing the criteria. They might be using similar guidance, as in postcodes being restricted for one is restricted for everybody else. I also see that there will be a lessening of rates. So as the RBA starts to do the decrease in the interest rate, we will see that coming through the SDA lenders as well, and that will impact people's consideration of whether this is the risk reward is right. I see definitely more of the units coming through. And I think when you're looking at the fractional option, where they're building a partnership between builders and the agencies putting the tenants in, I think that's where the fractional will come to the fore, because you can't just build something in the middle of nowhere outside of those city centres without having that absolute certainty that you're going to get that partnership for the tenanting side as well. So those are the things I see evolving.
Minh, what about you? Have you got any predictions for the future? Where do you think it's going?
I saw a LinkedIn post from Joz from Barwon this morning talking about a new platform thing going through NetWealth. NetWealth is an IDPS of Master Trust, yeah, and how they've now linked up with the likes of NetWealth to bring in wholesale investors through their massive funds management world into that kind of thing. So I think that's where it's going to go towards, where more institutions like Colonial First State, Quarries, NetWealth, all those institutional organizations who start bringing in the NDIS kind of product inside their wholesale or retail platforms, yes, which are institutional based, not little micro startup companies with their little ASL thing. And that's not going to work.
How do you differentiate between those two when you're talking to the audience? Because obviously there's going to be people out there right now that are considering, hey, should I put in $50,000 and do some kind of joint venture with this new startup fund that's that's created to minimize your risk?
It's hard for the average mum and dad to differentiate between professional, institutional versus startup, fake kind of AFSL syndicate. Yep. It's very hard to look into the reputation, Google their name, like, Macquarie or Colonial First State, NetWealth. They're controlling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of funds, versus little startup guy with an AFSL license trying to raise $3 million for himself. So big difference between the two, yeah? But that's the first part. Second part is really looking at who is the investment manager or the people behind that, who is the providers, where they're investing in, because they're the fundamentals anyway still. I mean, we saw the whole Domicom thing fall apart. Stockbrokers raising capital on a thing called Domicom platform, and that fell apart massively because they were being run by stockbrokers with people who didn't know what they're doing.
No idea about it.
No idea. So about the tenancy, I was saying in life, everyone stick to your own lane. Don't try and cross over to other things out there. Same thing applies here. But back to the podcast show itself, though. I mean, that was a pretty big thing, Debbie. The Domicom thing. So that me and Rob did.
Yes.
That was about the Fin Review, and we talk about public news information. So we're very careful on the show here. If it's out in the news, bang, we're like a dog on a bone. Like we read the article, we talk about it, we assess it, our viewpoints, and we'll spend more time the next few weeks talking about Domicom. I said not Domicom, Cocoon, and also NDISP as well. Because if we talk about stuff that's not public, it's hearsay, it's gossip, we could be sued for that. So we're very mindful of that, yeah? But when it's public news, mate, it's public news.
Can you share some of that information with your clients, even if it isn't public news?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So off channel, you can share that. So
of course,
we have a responsibility.
Yeah. So we're very appreciative of the wonderful business relations we've created because of the podcast show. Because Debbie, the truth be told, if we didn't have the show the last 3 years, where would we be as a business?
Probably in a little bit more of the dark than you would.
We are nobody. We are a nobody.
So you feel that the podcast has been the way that you've made those interconnections.
Debbie, please tell Ian here and also our listeners the impact of all the inquiries the last 3-4 months, 2-3 months inbound into our office for business. Who are they? What are they?
I would say the majority of our queries coming in at the moment are people looking for advice on a specific project they would like to do. So they're fee-for-service clients. They've got a block of land, they're a small developer, they want to do something in the NDIS space, in the SDA space, and they are looking to engage an advisory consultation firm.
I think, Ian, I've had 10 inquiries from now on coming into our office. I think 4 or 5 help me fill up my tenancy of my house, my empty house.
It's in the yards now.
3 or 4 I have a block of land, help me develop it into an SDA project.
Yeah.
And 1 or 2 is I want to buy a package, an opportunity.
I want to buy a property.
So really 8 out of 10 of our inquiries are fee-for-service inquiries who need help somehow.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and you've positioned yourself well because you've become a source of, the knowledge and influence.
Yeah. And this is really, I guess, what the podcast has become. Firstly, a source of making fantastic connections for us and bringing business, but educating the market. And when we're just talking about the predictions for the future, obviously both of you were talking about the investment side of it. I don't want to start the discussion because it'll go on for an hour or more of predictions for the future of the SDA world within the provider market with everything that's going on. But, we constantly speak to people who just don't understand it from within the market. And I think the importance of spreading awareness, I think that has been a really big part of what this podcast is all about.
Awareness and then dealing with the misinformation and the disinformation. And obviously the difference between the two is might be an error that is a lack of understanding. And dis is on purposely directing people into something that is incorrect and doing it knowingly. Then obviously providing the data. There's been a massive change over the last few years of the amount of data that clients come to you with already. They've done the research. They're not anybody's fool. They're not going to fall for the sales patter on the phone. And so what we've done here is we've created this more level field by educating people. But it comes down to the main principles of investing in property. You've got to get the location right. And that's what we've been instrumental in providing. Don't go here, do go there. This is the data to back it up. And that's been so essential for investors moving forward.
Absolutely. Ian, what have you sort of got out of being involved in the podcast? You've done quite a few episodes with us now.
Oh, look, I think it is a two-way street. It is when you do the podcast, I take it seriously. I draw my mind backs and pull in the data and try and work out, well, is that true? And am I going to say something online that's not correct or I haven't done my research? And the answer is...
As opposed to Minh and I just totally winging it every day.
Well, look, if you're living it every day like you are, it's probably second nature to you. But for me, coming on as a guest, I'm going to make sure that I say what I know is true, and I've got to be accountable. We are accountable on the podcast, and I think that was essential. If I'm sharing information, it's something I genuinely believe, and I've done enough research to get to that point. There's a credibility that comes from having a podcast, so it is our responsibility to maintain that credibility, the credibility of us as individuals, but also as the organization that's creating the podcast. And look, we've created a source where people can go and say, look, let's refer to that information that was on that podcast. And for me, being part of that, it was, I did notice, because obviously we do high yield investment in Bali as well. I noticed the amount of people that had listened to some of the podcasts that we had done together, and they came back and said, hey, I listened to you on the podcast. I know who you are, and I really want to hear more information about this. That to me was, better than so much marketing that could have been done out there, and just in a natural, organic way. So yes, look, the opportunity has been a privilege for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ian. Well, it's been a privilege to have you as a multiple time guest speaker. You're not really a guest speaker. You're one of the team. So, Minh, did you have anything to add on your experience from the podcast?
What started out as we'll just do this to not repeat ourselves all the time on the phone attitude turned into a wonderful following. Even in the quiet times now today, after 3 years, we're still getting 1,500 listeners a month, still downloads a month. So
yeah, I think we're almost at the 75,000 downloads.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we were at our peak 3,000 a month downloads. Now we're at 1,500 a month. Yeah.
I mean, that's just a reflection of the market. So look, what's next for the podcast? What do you think the next 100 episodes will focus on?
I've been umming and ahhing about doing a video podcast. Oh my God, this is too much work. Maybe one or two here and there, but I don't want to go into whole video editing and that. I don't know, maybe. But if we continue doing our one show per week, right? And the SDA world will always evolve, so will the NDIS world. We'll just go with the flow, I think. Go with the flow with what's happening in our world.
As we always have. Yeah. But I think some ideas is, we have had some really good sub-series and themes, such as the Ask Us Anything. We've got the SDA Unlocked series that we do, and we've had other themes, such as obviously the SDA Housing Assist, the participant procurement, all the episodes that we did on the price review and the NDIS review. Of course, as Ian mentioned, we've touched on Bali, our other business, which, by the way, we will be creating a whole new podcast for in the near future. That's the plan for that company. But I think getting more guest speakers on, without a doubt, more people who've got their real specific niche in the industry and finding more about that side of it, finding out what innovations are happening. Minh, have you got a guest wish list?
I would love to interview Jeremy, the CEO of the SDA Alliance. I would love to interview one of the ministers in the NDIS as well.
Bill Shorten, yeah.
Well, he's going, yeah.
He's going out, yeah, I know.
I don't know, Debbie, what are your thoughts? You tell me, what do you want to, who do you want to interview?
Definitely. Those would be great. Some participants maybe who've, going through their story, their journey.
I reached out to last night, the whistleblower of the Cocoon scandal.
Oh, great.
So she said yes. She's happy to interview as well. So there'll be a 2-part episode there on that topic of Cocoon as well, which is a massive, massive scandal at the moment.
And I think just more guest speakers, just listeners and their journey and what they've learned. We love those, and maybe some more investor success stories, because we all know that everyone who gets into this as an investment is looking for it to be successful. Obviously, you don't do it otherwise. And we always hear the negatives, and we are hearing a lot of that at the moment with these distressed properties and distressed investors who have got properties that they've not been able to tenant, etc. But there are plenty of people who have got successful SDA investments that are doing great. They're tenanted, they're making good money, and they exited successfully. More of those.
They're coming back for their third and fourth properties, really. So look, there is success, but it's based on them taking the advice and treading with caution.
My biggest thing is with this whole podcast, it's put not a target, put us on the map of SDA.
Yep.
People know who we are, because there's no one else doing SDA education. I mean, Apollo tried to do their thing with their podcast, and that stopped after 4 videos or on YouTube. And then you go to Spotify and look for SDA podcast. There's not much out there. It's all quiet there. But we be consistent, we're passionate, consistent, and we're humbled about the process. And people can hear that in our presentation on this podcast. We're winging it, but we're honest. I mean, we don't script this presentation. We just talk as we see fit. And people respect that. They love that about us. I think that's a merit to us, Ian, the whole team who put together effort and time to show that we're passionate about what we do. And we are honest and transparent. That's the key word here, honesty. I mean, you'll never... Look, business should be easy, Ian, Debbie. Why should you lie or be dishonest or... Yeah.
If you've got to be honest and dishonest and lie, then, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
And we know there are a lot of dishonest people out there, a lot out there. And that's a shame.
Industry there, right?
And we know a lot of the bad press you hear about in the news these days about SDA or NDIS, we knew about that 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago. But we can't say it. Like, we can't say this information publicly, but we know about it, And so we see the mistakes and the hurdles and the negativity that's happening out there in the marketplace with all these organizations. And we share this information confidentially when we talk to people one-on-one about it. And that's important, because this podcast show has given us the platform to talk as we see fit. And also no one can respond to us, because how can you respond? It's a one-by street here. We say what we say, and that's it. You can't really respond to
and it's also out there forever.
Yeah.
You can't take it back. So on that note, are there any regrets? Anything that you should have done that you didn't do? Anything that you wish you'd done more of?
No regrets. I mean, obviously with a podcast on such a fast moving landscape that this industry is, the episodes that do date back 3 years ago, a lot of those are quite out of date, and the information will have changed.
I have one regret. I've actually prepared 30, 40 different topics for the podcast 8, 9 months ago. It's in our podcast system. Not recorded yet, just the topic, the headline only.
Yep.
We have had time to actually even do those topics, because we have so much coming in every week of new topics, new speakers, that our topics from a year ago are still sitting there in limbo, waiting to be recorded.
They're your reserve topics.
Yes.
Yep.
So in theory, we could do 100 topics right now, but we have no time to do it.
No.
Because we're doing one a week.
Sounds like you think you should be doing more than one per week.
It is time consuming doing the editing and presenting, publishing, because the volume of people listening are not there. One's enough. It used to be 2 a week is fine. Now one's enough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I guess that the last thing I want to mention on that whole, what's next is we love hearing from our listeners when we do get feedback, comments, and we just want more of that. Please tell us what you want us to talk about. Submit your ideas, your feedback, please, and we will very happily take it on board and bring that into a future episode. And if you want to be a guest speaker, we'd love that as well.
So, Ian, who's your wish list guest speakers you want to see on this show in the future?
I think there's some people that have had a very successful journey and have really benefited from our approach, our honesty, our support, our navigation. I think maybe people that have successfully navigated this as investors, I'd like to see more of them on the podcast, because there's nothing more powerful than somebody that's actually succeeded. Why did they succeed when there's so many that have also failed as well, by contrast? And maybe this is something that could be a little bit counterintuitive. Maybe we get somebody on that will be prepared to talk about why it didn't work for them. How did they make those mistakes, and where did they get that so wrong? And I'll leave it with this thought. I was speaking to a broker, and he does a lot of speaking in the circuit on SDA, and he said, look, most of the time people are not intentionally telling you the wrong information. It's just that it's changing so much that what was true a year, 2 years ago is no longer true now. So it could be that people are victims of information that just hasn't been updated.
Mm-hmm.
But that's down to the responsibility of the organization to get their figures right and get their information updated.
Yeah,
And that's where the podcast comes in. It makes us credible and responsible.
that's true. Look, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Any last words from you, Minh?
No, we just want to keep on doing what we do. You know, luckily we've pivoted our services to be more advisory than just sales. And I think over the time, look, let's be honest, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, we tried to lay low, because we were a real estate business, and we were like everyone else. And it was hard for people or consumers or stakeholders to really know what we really do, because we're just a real estate business.
We even had an episode, didn't we? What do we actually do?
Yeah. And people out there think we're a provider.
Mm. Yes, a lot of people think we're a provider.
Because we know so much, because you must be a provider. Well, no, we're not a provider. So we have pivoted our service in the last 2 years to be more focused on the needs of the marketplace. Plus, the show has now given us a very good reputation as some good guys out there who are honest and want to help the industry. Because I know at the very start, Minh, that real estate agent, don't deal with him. There was negativity towards me, and call it tall poppy syndrome, or call whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, I was selling real estate, but aren't we all? But now we're not really selling real estate anymore. We're selling service and ideas and advice. So, you know, that's the truth. I mean, I really hope that we can evolve to a bigger level of advisory and advice to the marketplace for SDA. And we hope that the bigger players in the game do come to us, those players being lenders or non-profit organizations or civil providers, can come to us for advice, because we're here to give advice. We don't lie. We tell the truth. We know what's good and bad. We know who's evil. You know,
We're in the thick of it.
yeah,
We know the good players and the bad players.
yeah. So we hope people can reach out to us, ask for advice or support and help, because we're here to help. We don't want to see the marketplace or the industry of SDA fall apart because of a few bad eggs. No, we don't. We want to help, and that's the truth, you know. So all you non-believers out there who don't believe SDA is a worthwhile thing, it is. What SDA can be good if it's done right with the right people and the right purpose.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, well, I'm going to call it there. We've recorded a
41 minutes.
41-minute episode today, or thereabouts. So I want to thank you all again, to our loyal listeners, for being with us through this long journey we've already had. We'd love you to leave us a review if you feel that you do gain value from listening to our podcast.
Please send us a written testimonial on how you feel about the podcast show and your journey listening as a listener to info@endos.property, and Debbie will put it on our website.
Absolutely. And here's to the next 300 episodes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.